and how it affects you. So let's first start off. One of the examples that we see here is, for example, in Maryland. In Maryland, one of the laws that was passed, it basically says 10 grams or less of marijuana has been decriminalized, and so as a result of that, the appellate court has come back and said that the odor of marijuana by itself is insufficient to establish reasonable suspicion of criminal activity and not enough to establish probable cause for a search as well. Same thing in Colorado. The Colorado Supreme Court also threw out drug convictions in 2019, and since then, based upon that the police had no reasonable suspicion or justification whatsoever to hold in one example, a man in his truck, waiting for a dog to show up, a drug dog to show up, and then they sniffed his vehicle. They threw out that conviction because they said, why? Well, marijuana is legal in that state, and because it is legal, it has been decriminalized. That does not provide a reasonable suspicion or probable cause for the officer to do anything as it relates to the so-called whiff of pot. Now, this isn't always the case in every state. For example, in Michigan, the Michigan Supreme Court has said that it is permitted. Now, even though here's the rule in Michigan, if it's anything less than 2.5 ounces of pot, then that has been decriminalized, but anything above 2.5 ounces is still against the law. So as a result of that, they've come back and said, well, because there is some illegality associated with possessing marijuana, then we're going to say if the officer smells it, then there may be a chance there's more than 2.5 ounces there, so it's allowed there. Another example is in Florida. Even though, in every one of these states, the laws change to some extent every year. Medical marijuana is allowable, just like it is in Texas, if you have what's called a Texas Compassionate Care Act card, if you're approved through a doctor. But they have said because it's only legal for medicinal purposes, if an officer smells the odor of burnt marijuana, that can be the basis for them to then have a search of your vehicle, and therefore it's legal. Okay, so notice one of the first questions you have to ask yourself, is the state that I'm in, is marijuana illegal? Or is it legal? If it's illegal, then there's a very good chance that the courts are going to rule that the so-called whiff of pot is the basis for them to be able to do a search without a warrant. So that can be enough to establish reasonable suspicion, or in this case, probable cause, to be able to search your vehicle. If you're in a state where it's completely legalized, like you're talking about Colorado, you're talking about the example of in Maryland, then you're going to be more protected there, okay? So let's talk about how to handle this situation when you're dealing with a police officer. Let's say he comes up to you, here you are in your car, you've been pulled over, now the officer's going to go and speak to you like he did Mr. Dixon here and start asking you some questions. What should you do? Now, in fact, before I even break down the exact steps you should take, I want you to know I have seen literally thousands of police reports at our criminal defense law firm where this common tactic is used. So this is what a lot of police officers in Texas will do. They will be following you for a certain period of time, similar to what they did to Mr. Dixon, and they'll look for any ticky-tack reason to pull you over, for any traffic violation. For instance, let's say you stopped right over the crosswalk at a stop sign, or at a stoplight. They'll use that and say, ooh, traffic violation, you didn't stop far enough back. Or maybe you signaled a lane change, but you didn't do it within 50 feet, or they believe that you didn't do it within the time frame provided under your traffic code, depending on what state you're in. What they'll do is they'll make estimates on that, and they'll use that as a basis to establish reasonable suspicion to pull you over. Well, the moment they pull you over, what are they going to do? And now they want to interact with you and start having conversations. And if there's something they either see in plain view, or there's something they just don't like about the way something smells, whatever that is, because remember, it's going to be the officer's word against your word at that point. Now they can use it as a basis to search your vehicle. So I want to remind you about this. It's extremely important here that you're careful about this. In states like Ohio and Texas, it's very common that officers will have a canine unit, a drug dog, literally nearby. I've seen it where an officer pulls someone over to give them a traffic ticket, which many times they don't even write the traffic ticket. They just use that as the basis to pull them over. And then there will literally be a drug dog 30 seconds away, and they're using anything they can as a basis to then be able to search that vehicle or run the drug dog around that vehicle, okay? So let's discuss this for a few minutes as we look at this. First of all, what are some of the steps?
Hell, I'm using wild hemp, all natural. No fucking sauce for the boss, right?
You should take if you find yourself being pulled over